Hey, how's everybody doing?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
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 Good morning.
Morning.
Shiny, happy people. Always good to see. Lots of smiles. Some of you are cheating, though, because it's really not your video. It's just your smiling headshot. So, you know, you only get half points if it's your smiling headshot in the morning.
I see
Hi.
John and George from the Encore class. Good to see you, John and George.
Good to
It's
see
your
you.
fault, Aaron. You've done such a good job. It's your fault.
It's not my fault.
It is Aaron's fault. It's always Aaron. Regardless of what it is, I can promise you it's Aaron's fault.
Okay, maybe it is.
It's been her fault for a long time. His fault for a long time.
Yes, it is.
All right. I mean, good, bad, or otherwise. If it's good, it's Aaron's fault. I'll give him full credit. If it's bad, though, I promise you he's also going down for that, too. All right. Well, welcome. We're excited to have everybody here this morning. We love our Bingham Fellows, and we are really enthused about how excited the community has embraced our topic for this next year. And that's why you all are here. So it's my job to welcome all of you. My name's Cynthia Napek, and I am the president of the Leadership Louisville Center. And what I wanted to do first is just give you a little bit of orientation about the Leadership Louisville Center. So as Aaron has already discovered, hello, Christy. We have lots of alumni on this call already. You all know us. You've been through one of our programs, but there's actually also quite a few of you on this Zoom call this morning that are brand new to the Leadership Louisville Center. So I'm going to start with just a little bit about Leadership Louisville, and then we'll kind of jump into what our agenda is, you know, to give you some specific information. Leadership Louisville is a 40-year-old organization. And if you've lived in another city in the country, then you may have participated or been aware of similar programs, because there are civic engagement programs like us in cities all across the country. So there's a Leadership Miami, and there's a Leadership San Diego, and everywhere in between. I wonder if it's coincidence that I just chose 2 beach towns for those examples. But the difference is that Leadership Louisville Center is a little bit more robust than a lot of our peers and colleagues across the country. We're a 40-year-old organization, and what that has allowed us to do is kind of grow and expand as we go. But all of our programs have a central purpose, and that is basically our purpose is to inspire and equip leaders to be better and do better. What that effectively means for us is that all those words in that purpose statement are important to us, particularly when we say we inspire, and that has to do with all of the work that we do around our civic engagement programs. Our hope is that we take you out into the community, we show you what's going on, and you are inspired by something happening. And so that's part of the core of who we are, is helping you get inspired to serve the greater good. But one of the things we've also discovered is that it's not enough to just inspire people to go out and do good things. You also have to equip them, and that's, you know, equipping you to get things done with and through other people, giving you the skills that you need to be a good leader. And that's a huge piece of what we do with all of our programs, in particular with our Green Room programs. And then we hope that you will personally be better and go out into the community and do better. The way that we have it lined up, the way that our growth has happened, is we started with a flagship program. That's our Leadership Louisville program. And that's what's similar in organizations across the country. And at that point, and probably 30 plus years ago, in our orientation, our board of directors said, you know, it's great that we've rounded up these interesting people in the community and showed them what's going on. But so what? Like we need to do a little something more. And so the Bingham Fellows program was endowed to answer that call, to see if you rounded up a group of concerned citizens and charged them with moving the needle on community change and provided them with a little form and structure. Can we really change the world, right? We also have a short format program that's our Focus Louisville program. Several of you are alumni of that. We said, well, we need to look at young professionals and make sure that we get our community leaders trained up from the earliest parts of their career. And that's our Ignite program. And then our Encore program is our most recent addition to the civic program lineup. And that is for our baby boomers, to make sure that as they transition towards the next stage in their professional lives, that we keep them connected to community, that we keep that resource active in civic life. So, and then the last thing is our green room, which is 1 and 2 day workshops where you can drop in and figure out how to be the very best version of yourself, how to get things done with and through other people. So, so that's kind of the overview, I think, of what the Leadership Louisville Center is. I mean, ultimately, I love to study anthropology and and how do we work as humans? How do we operate as tribes? And the thing that I have noticed is that to truly drive change as a human society, it requires 2 things. The first thing is that it requires someone who finds their passion and says, I simply will not rest until all of the children are fed. I simply will not rest until all of the people are treated equally. I simply will not rest until this disease no longer takes our loved ones. And that's an important first ingredient, but it is just the first ingredient. It's not enough to actually drive significant, major change. The second piece of the equation is this: someone who finds their passion, wakes up every morning and says, I'm going to move the needle on this. And the second thing is they find other people who share that same passion. And when we connect those 2 dots, that's when magic happens. And all of our programs are centered around that notion, Bingham Fellows in particular. So you all came to find out a little bit more about Bingham Fellows. Let's go over not just the broad Leadership Louisville, but let's get into the specifics, the agenda for our chat today, and what you're here to learn about. You're going to meet some of the fantastic people at the Leadership Louisville Center who are going to be part of your guides and your Sherpas for the Bingham Fellows experience. So we'll do that actually kind of interspersed as everybody takes their few slides in this next hour. And then we're also going to cover, like, well, what is the Bingham Fellows, just broadly? What do they do? Who are they? What's this program all about? We'll hit the topic for 21. What is our goal? What's our topic for this next year's Bingham Fellows class? We'll get into a little bit of the details of how the program works. And because, of course, I love the Bingham Fellows. I was a Bingham Fellow. That's actually how I came to the Leadership Louisville Center, is I participated in the Bingham Fellows, and I loved it so much that I've been hanging out ever since then. But I may not be the most unbiased source of information about how fantastic the Bingham Fellows are. So you're going to meet some of our alumni, some of our graduates who have a slightly less biased opinion of Bingham Fellows than I do. You can ask them some questions and they'll tell you if I'm lying. We're going to get into the nuts and bolts of how you apply, just to make sure that everyone understands that process. And then we'll also just have some Q&A and answer your questions and figure out what's on your mind. So that's kind of our hit list for today. And we're going to start with, what is a Bingham Fellow? What exactly is this program? So started in 1988. And the thing of it is, I think I mentioned when we kind of did the overview, is the premise was, well, rather than just getting together a group and learning about the community, how can we actually drive some positive change? And what they wanted to do is make this like what we call now a social innovation accelerator. You know, how do we drive change faster than what it usually takes us in the community? And over the last 30 plus years, we've been building this and trial and error. You know, we've screwed it up a few times. We've learned a lot about how to do this. We're continuing to learn, but we have visitors from across the country who come to learn how to do Bingham Fellows. Our colleagues here, there, and everywhere want to replicate this program, partially because it has a good track record of actually leaving a good legacy and doing some amazing things in the community. It has this legacy of social entrepreneurship. The deliverables for Bingham Fellows have been, I mean, when they started out, like their very first class, they were looking at housing, affordable housing, you know, and this is 30 plus years ago. So this is long before there actually was were organizations that were dedicated to looking at affordable housing in our community. So the very first class created the Housing Partnership, which is an amazing organization that is still working now 30 years later to help make sure that we have affordable housing in our community. So some of the other, Amy, if you'll, can I get you to bump one more slide there? There we go. So a few of the other things that they've done, like, you know, if you want to jump more recently, I was just on the GLI they had a program focused on West Louisville earlier this week. And they featured One West quite a bit. One West is an organization that is looking at economic development in West Louisville. And they have a very specific kind of field of how do we create wealth in West Louisville? How do we create a path to prosperity? And One West was created by Bingham Fellows. And so, you know, whether it's 30 years ago with Housing Partnership or more recently with One West, they have a track record as being good social entrepreneurs, as using this as an accelerant to do good things. They don't always create something new. Sometimes the work of Bingham Fellows is to go see what's out there, find a little spark, someone who's doing something amazing, and their job is to just throw gasoline on it and make sure that it explodes and goes in the way that it and achieves what it can. So like one example of that is the Fresh Stops. We were looking at food deserts in West Louisville, and there was one of the people in the class that was working with New Roots. And she had this little idea about kind of how to take a small farmer's market-y concept and bring it into West Louisville, but she wanted to scale it up. And what the Bingham Fellows were able to help her do was to get a grant from, I think, Johnson & Johnson, a big grant from Johnson & Johnson. It helped her distill all this crazy information in her head and make it replicable. And they took it from one Fresh Stop to like 18. And so there's these little things too that Bingham Fellows do to make a positive impact. We have lots of help. So we get all sorts of great people in the community involved. It won't just be the people in the Bingham Fellows, because we want all the right thought leaders to help us figure out, you know, way different options and opportunities. So we'll put together a great steering committee of people who have been doing the frontline work. Depending on which year it is, we always connect with people who know this topic. So we're pulling together a really great steering committee for you all of people that can be wonderful, interesting, amazing advisors. One of the things that I think is interesting about Bingham Fellows and their role as social entrepreneurs is that I do think that we have been leaning into some of the ideas of how do we create social justice in our community, and we've been doing it for a long time. I will say that some topics are more difficult than others. I've already admitted we have screwed it up, but I think we have learned from our, we've turned all of our failures into learning opportunities. So that's fantastic news for you all, because each year we do this and we lean into this work a little more, and we learn a little bit more about how to do this, how to be good allies, how to show up well in the community, and how to actually drive positive change. So I'm looking forward to this particular year, because I think it's really, really an important topic. And I think we've done some really good work in the past. So the sky's the limit on what we can achieve for this next year. But, I think one of the most important things that people often ask is, that's fantastic. It looks like the community benefits. Awesome, great. I'm totally here for the community benefit. But also, what's in it for me? So I want to talk just a little bit about what is the benefit to you. How do I benefit? And this is so I was a Bingham Fellow, and it's one of the things that I loved about the Leadership Louisville Center. And how I benefited was Bingham Fellows is rounding up the leader of leaders. It is truly a credentialing in how do I be a leader of leaders. For a lot of us, our business title, you hand your business card out and it says you're the senior vice president of something, you're the CEO, you're the managing partner. There's some credentialing going on there, and you're used to, when you walk in the doors at work, you say, I think we're going to go, I think we're going to turn left here. And everybody goes, yes, left. That is a great idea. We should all turn left. In Bingham Fellows, it doesn't matter what your title is, because everybody's got a great title, is, well qualified to lead. And so this becomes less about your title and more about your ability to influence. So for me, when I was a Bingham Fellow, one of the things that I got out of it that I really enjoyed was understanding that. How do I move people in directions all together without positional authority? And there's all sorts of other really great leadership lessons that I think only happen in Bingham Fellows. I've done, because of the nature of what we do at Leadership Louisville, I've had the privilege of doing some really fancy, really expensive kinds of leadership development trainings so that we can go out and see what's out there and bring it home. And I will tell you that none of them, I've been to the fancy Harvard programs, and none of them will you learn as much as in Bingham Fellows. Clearly, again, I know I'll own my own bias on that, but I'm telling you, because of the nature, because of the difficulty of it, because of all the beautiful, strange, different kinds of people who show up for Bingham Fellows, nothing will give you a leadership experience like Bingham Fellows will. And that's the biggest benefit. But the secondary benefit is one of the folks on our team that you'll meet as part of your Bingham Fellows experience is Lisa Zangari. And Lisa worked for What If in Manhattan. So What If is an innovation consultancy. And what she did is she took all this 30 years of experience that we had driving social innovation, and she blended it with what she knew, what she had been working with Fortune 500 companies on how to drive innovation. And she blended those two things together. And what we've got is a social innovation toolkit. And you'll be able to then use this for yourself as a leader in the community, as a leader in your company, to drive innovation and to be a thought leader in that realm. And I think that's really very valuable as well. So hopefully those two things make it, and that's I love about Leadership Louisville programs, is we try and make them win-win-win, right? We try and make them a win for the community. We try and make them a win for you personally. And we try and make them a win for your organization. And that's our goal. So I think that Bingham Fellows is a worthy endeavor of your time. And I think it's one of those things that credentials you as a leader of leaders. I always I like Churchill. I think he's highly quotable. And one of the things that Churchill believed is that all of us at some point in our lives would be called to do something very important. And what he said is, what a shame it would be if you found yourself unprepared at what should have been your finest hour. And Bingham Fellows is definitely one of those things that helps you be prepared to show up when it comes time to be your finest hour. For some of you, Bingham Fellows may actually be part of your legacy and part of how you create your finest hour. I can't promise that for everybody, but I can promise you that it will be one of those things that made you ready for when your finest hour comes. So let's talk about this topic and what we've chosen to do in this next year. I'm very excited about it. I think it's mission critical for our community. And I love having Joe as a partner in this work, because Joe has been invested in the Louisville community for a long time. She's had several different leadership roles in the community. She loves to jump into the research that you'll need in order to be good Bingham Fellows. So I want to introduce to you the amazingly talented, the delightful Joe Lloyd Triplett, who's going to talk to you about this topic and get us into this great work that we're going to do.
Thank you, Cynthia. So good morning, everyone. I'm Joe Lloyd Triplett. I'm the Leadership Development Manager at the Center. And so thank you for joining us this morning. Let's jump in a little bit to this specific topic. One of the main reasons, I'm sure, why you're here this morning and why Bingham Fellows this year is really speaking to you. So belonging, building a culture of inclusivity. I want to kind of tell you the why behind it first. So every year, when we get into determining what the next topic will be for Bingham Fellows, there are some really important things that we kind of lay out. And those really are that this topic is something that is mission critical in terms of the timing for our community. Also, we look at what is really happening on the ground. Is there a critical mass of people already engaged and behind this, so that if a Bingham Fellows class works on this topic, it is something that people are already engaged in, aware of, and really behind, so that it can move forward. And the most important thing is sustainability. So this is a 12-month program. It's a lot of hard work, and it will have great impact. So is that impact going to be sustainable down the road? So all of those are the key areas really that we kind of take a look at before determining what can be next year's topic. And of course, this year, I think was probably the clearest direction that we've had in terms of determining what a topic's going to be. You'll see on the screen here the opportunities that I know that you are all fully aware of in terms of what our community is facing, not just our community, but nationally as well. And the Bingham Fellows, as a 12-month accelerator program, cannot, of course, solve these deep-rooted issues, but they can, and you all can and could, as a Bingham Fellow, have an impact on a piece of the pie by really amplifying the voices and the work that's already been gaining momentum in these areas. We took a really long and hard look at where could the Leadership Louisville Center really have the biggest impact in this area? What is our slice of the pie? And where could a Bingham Fellows class make the most difference? And so what we've landed on is belonging. And we've done that because we all know that when an individual lacks a sense of belonging, and whether that is in their community or in their workplace, the consequences and the outcomes of that are only negative. And so the class this year is going to be working on making a business case for belonging, because you can only thrive, you can only reach your full potential really when you're included, when you're engaged, and most importantly, when you feel heard. And so this is true, again, throughout the continuum, through education, in the workforce, and in our neighborhoods. So the class will look at inclusivity efforts. They're going to be connecting with leaders who are leading the charge with this. They'll be researching best practices, and they'll be trying to identify solutions. Now, with all that said, I know you're probably thinking, this sounds really super vague, Joe. Can you give us some more concrete examples of exactly what the focus is going to be? And the answer to that is both yes and no. Because the beauty of Bingham Fellows is that we choose a topic that is just broad enough for you to be able to get in there and do your own exploring, for you to be able to pick that piece of the pie and choose your own lane. So we're going to be providing content experts to speak to you on this. You're going to be reading studies and doing research. You'll have a wealth of experience and experts within your own class that you can look to. And really be able to determine, looking around at your classmates, what are our unique skills? What resources does our cohort bring to the table, and where do our personal passions lie in this area? And then you'll be able to forge your own path, your own lanes as you move forward. But let me give you just a couple examples of the direction we'll be moving in and things that we'll probably cover as we go through the experience. So, for example, we'll probably be looking at what all of us are doing within our own organizations. We'll be maybe discussing how we could create richer and more diverse pathways into leadership roles in our organizations and in all organizations and businesses throughout our community. We may be discussing affinity groups. What things are happening around town that are really working well, that are having good outcomes. We'll probably look nationally and say, is there anything really innovative that is happening somewhere else that we're not currently doing that could be brought to Louisville and replicated here? And then we may also look at factors that create a sense of belonging in a more broader context in our community as well. And I do invite you to, as we go through this, put any questions in the chat that we can get to later. If you would like more specific examples of things that, that may come out through this Bingham Fellows class. But I do want to take a second to tell you about what it would be like being a Bingham Fellow. What would the year, what would your experience really feel like? And so you'll see that the front end, the January through April, is really the learning piece. That is when you're speaking to the experts, you're learning from each other in your cohort, you're reading the studies, the reports, and you're gathering all of these insights so that when we get to May, we will take a 2-day retreat and you will organize all of the information that you've been gathering along these first few months to really be able to look at those, to stand back and identify the richest, most fertile opportunities that there are for your class to jump into. And in doing it this way, you will come up with ideas, you'll get into teams and form projects around ideas that are really grounded in that insight that you've spent the front piece of your experience gathering. And then the work really begins. So June through December is when you're in your team, you've found your lane, you've determined your project, you've picked your piece of the pie, and you're off and running and working on that through the remainder of the year, with the goal that in January, you will then launch your project out into the world, out into the public. And as Cynthia mentioned before, we do have a fantastic steering committee that will be with you along the way, that will provide you feedback, resources, great advice and support as you go through the second half of the year. So when you get to January and we have our launch event, we will be inviting the community to come and hear everything about your experience, what is your project going forward, and what do they need to know about it, all the stakeholders will be in the room, and how can they get involved with your product, your project going forward. And your experience will actually be bookended by launches. So you'll actually begin by attending the launch of the current 2020 Bingham Fellows class. So you'll get to see all of the current teams presenting on what they've done over the year and what they're hoping to achieve going forward with their projects as they're now launching them. So you'll really kind of see the end result at the beginning, and so you'll have an idea of what the goal is to get to 12 months after you begin your experience. And as Cynthia said, we may have some biases with Bingham Fellows. We're in it, we live it, and we love the program. But we really want to give you the opportunity to hear from individuals that have gone through it themselves and can tell you about their own personal experiences. So I want to welcome two fantastic, wonderful grads. We have Tara Lavelle and Joe DeCensi. Tara is the President and CEO of the Black Community Development Corporation, and Joe DeCensi is the President of Educational Directions. I want to welcome them both this morning and thank them for spending some time with us. And first of all, I'm going to again direct you to the chat. Any questions you have specifically for the grads, go ahead and put them in whenever those come to you, and we will get to those as well. But first of all, I want to start off by asking both of you to tell us a little bit about what the topic was when you went through Bingham Fellows, and then also your project. What were the outcomes of your team? So let's start with Tara.
Sure. I think I'm so sorry. I'm in my car. I made it to my next meeting before you called on me, so I'm not driving, guys. So I am Tara Lavelle, President and CEO of the Black Community Development Corporation. Was part of the 2018 Safe and Thriving City Bingham Fellows program. Wonderful program, right? And I think everybody on the call, I'm just going to jump right to it, should apply. You certainly should. And the topic this year is wonderful. I'm actually kind of considering throwing my hat back in there. Our team in our class came up with a program called the UGIMA Experience. What it was or is a full day of immersion into the history of the 9 West End neighborhoods. We picked the name UGIMA because UGIMA, it's one of the Kwanzaa principles, it's the third one. And so it centers around collective work and responsibility. And so when our team went through its learning and listening session, what we decided was we needed to make sure that we provided a positive narrative to all of the wonderful gems and jewels of the 9 West End neighborhoods. So we developed a program. It was a one-day immersion into all of those neighborhoods. Much like if any of you all participated in GLIDE this week earlier, it was a one-day version of your 3-day versions, if you will. And so I was lucky enough that the team chose the Black CDC to actually house the program. So it still, to this day, sits under our nonprofit as a program that we can still offer to people in the community. Is that enough, Joe, for my program?
That's perfect. Thank you, Tara. So let's go to Joe.
Hi, everyone. I was with a group called the Pathway Pavers from about 2 years ago. We were taking on that year's topic was K-12 education here in the region. And I run an educational company and also teach leadership development in grad school. And I can tell you both from an educational perspective and from a leadership perspective, I think I learned a lot more than I was able to put back into the program. We had a really great year and a really great group that we worked with. our group, the Pathway Pavers, decided we wanted to be an accelerator. So we knew that we didn't want to start something from scratch. We wanted to take an existing not-for-profit that was ready to scale, or that was ready to do something bigger, or just needed more hands on deck than what they currently had. And we chose a great group in town called Educational Justice that works with tutoring. They match up mentors and mentees, and they try to tutor some folks that maybe need a little extra help. They have a lot going on. They were doing a big software update. They're expanding quite a few things. So they wanted to give us the niche of specifically looking at how to get volunteers, both to retain and go out and recruit new volunteers. And our group was really nice because we had people from the Girl Scouts, people from University of Louisville Law School, and a whole bunch of diverse folks that came together for this particular piece of the pie that they needed. And they were able to get like a world-class task force just on this one particular thing that they didn't have time to completely flesh out themselves. So it was an incredibly intense year, but it really felt great that we gave them a playbook. We introduced them to a bunch of new folks to get in a corporate level to do some recruiting. So we actually have some output that really made our year worthwhile. So differing from starting from something from scratch, you can also take something that's existing and take some aspect of it and just run with it your half year that you're putting your project together.
Thank you, Joe. And so I want to ask you both, if you could talk a little bit about the impact that you felt, not just your project, but your entire class, so the topic that year had on the community. And so let's go back and start with Tara.
So again, I think when during the time of our class in our community as a whole, as it is, you know, really still to this day, the West End has been an area of that's needed some attention, right? And so one of the biggest things that we wanted to do was to make sure that whatever light we shined on this area of town, when we thought about making it safe and thriving, was the first thing we had to do was tell a very accurate story about the West End, right? And all of its residents, its businesses, what it's still yet to even come to this part of town. And so I think our program, the UGMA experience, did provide an eye-opening look at the West End, maybe in a way that it had not been looked at in years, right? We've always known there were jewels there and that, you know, it was a wonderful place. But over the course of time, the narrative has changed. And so we wanted to make sure that we flipped the script and we brought back the positive narrative of the 9 West neighborhoods. And I think we did that so much so that, again, the light has not stopped shining on the West End. And so I think the impact that our Bingham Fellows class brought to the city is a continued effort to grow and develop the West End.
And like Tara, their particular year where there was so much out there, like you in ours, with K-12 education being such a broad topic, that has so many things that could potentially be helped. Kind of like with going into this year, when you first do the first third of the year, where you really get the immersion, where they don't want you to start day one with a topic. They want you to come in with an open mind, kind of immerse yourself in so many different aspects that you didn't know go into a particular topic. Like probably a lot of the things that are in this year's, we covered in ours too, things like redlining, things like sins of the past that we needed to overcome, educational trends that were developing around places, and then specifically here in Louisville. It almost gets a little bit overwhelming at first because there's so many things you can do, but then there's some organization that comes out of the chaos once the topics actually get to emerge. It was neat to see how many different, I think we had 6 which was way too many probably from what they said, but nobody would give up their project. We had 6 great projects emerge out of all this confluence of ideas and all the different site visits that we did. And it was really cool to see 6 individual things where our group really helped something, some aspect of this broader topic, which was education. So just looking at this year's topic, it's very broad and there's no way to fix it in a year, but it would be really interesting to see what, 3 to 5 passion projects people end up taking like over the finish line. And I will also say, we were the first class that got to watch the previous year's presentations. So that was kind of awesome at the end of the first day of orientation to know what a year from then was going to look like. So we kind of began with the end in mind from the get-go. So that's a nice piece that they've recently added within the last couple of years. But we were really happy with where our particular project went, but really proud of our entire class because there were no wasted projects. Every one of them helped Louisville in some way, either started something or accelerated something that was already existing.
Thank you. So let's look inward for a second, and after this I'll throw it out and see if we have anything in the chat. But let's talk about personal growth. So if you could each speak to what you felt like you gained from being a Bingham Fellows personally through going through this experience. And again, let's begin with Tara.
So being the leader of a nonprofit organization, most of my time and day is spent with either other nonprofits or with the people that we serve. And so being a part of Bingham Fellows put me in a room with, with all of Louisville, if you will. You've got your corporate, other nonprofit organizations, and even just individuals, right, who wanted to participate in a Leadership Louisville program. So, my group consisted of people from Centerstone, Metro United Way, to LG&E, to the CEO of Humana Foundation, just a gamut of persons that I got to meet and build relationships with. Even so much that mentorship came out of some of that as well. So personally, I think that's where I benefited. Now, Bingham Fellows was not my first program with Leadership Louisville. I've done Focus and as well as Leadership Louisville itself. So, this was just sort of the icing on the cake because it was a longer, more intense program. And so I really built some stronger relationships in the Bingham Fellows program.
And to piggyback off what Tara said, I've done Focus. My wife has done Leadership Louisville, so I've seen how that's gone. I will say that the fact that you're actually working on a project together and there's this actual output at the end of the year, I think that the relationships I made with a lot of the people on the broader group, but specifically my task force, were probably much richer. One, made some great contacts in places that with groups that I normally wouldn't get to affiliate with, but specifically made some really good friends out of it that we continue to stay in touch, and just some really, really good people. I will say that, it was cool to get to learn more about my industry in terms of being education, but the personal growth was the real highlight, the real cherry on top for me. If you've not done Leadership Louisville programs before, it's a master's class in how to run effective meetings, how to keep an agenda going, how to bring you together for a day and have as much energy at the end as you do at the beginning. I have to run day-long professional development sessions or sometimes week-long professional development sessions for principals and teachers. And there were so many great ideas about just how to keep everything moving, how to keep it fresh. Just process-wise, I think there's a lot leaders can take from your experience in a year of leadership in a Bingham Fellows.
Thank you. I'm taking a look at the chat. I don't see anything in the chat right now, so please do go ahead and ask anything that you would like to hear from the grads and from their own experience. If you are both able to stick around for a few more minutes, I'd love to be able to come back to you to field any questions that everyone has for you this morning. But I do want to thank you both, of course, for your time this morning and joining us and sharing your experience with us. But I definitely want to thank you both for all of the hard work that you put in to your Bingham Fellows experience and all of the impact that you've had since then. So thank you to both of you. So
And thank you all for such a great experience as well.
Thank you.
And I'm going to go next. So I want to make sure we have time for you to hear from Amy Jewell on our team, who's going to talk you through the actual process for how to apply to be a Bingham Fellow. So over to you, Amy.
Yes, thank you so much, Joe. Thank you all so much for joining us this morning. I know you probably got a lot of calendar invites from me, so I appreciate you hanging in here and joining us this morning. So all of this information, I'll start off by saying all of this information will be emailed to you promptly after this session ends. So every link we're talking about, every calendar date that we're talking about will be in your inbox soon. So don't feel like you have to write furiously throughout this process, but as Joe mentioned, the January through December dates, or the January through January dates, will be sent out. We recommend that you put those on your calendar now. You get out what you put into the program, and so attendance is really serious. We track that, and we want to make sure that you are there, building relationships and getting your just getting the most out of the program. And so certainly, please make sure that those dates are on your calendar. The 2 dates in February and the 2 dates in the 2 retreat dates in May are mandatory. So unable to miss those just because of the intense bonding and also the topic material that we'll be covering in those days. So please make sure that you can attend those before you fill out the application, before you do anything. And again, I'll send those out in just a little while. The application itself has 4 components. So there is an online application, 2 letters of recommendation if you haven't already gone through a leadership level program, and then we'll need a headshot. And so that online application, like I said, will be emailed to you shortly. And what we recommend is, unfortunately, you cannot fill it out and save it halfway through. You have to fill it out all in one sitting. And so there are some short answer questions. If you feel as though you want to maybe think on some of those short answers before you go ahead and submit that application, a lot of people will take some of those questions, put them in Word, type out an answer, and then go ahead and fill out the application. So that's a little trick of the trade. That online form, like I said, will be emailed to you. The letters of recommendation, we recommend that you think through maybe who are some individuals in your life that really can speak to why this topic is important, why you should be in the room. Like Joe and Cynthia have mentioned, it is a competitive process, and so we definitely want to make sure that you're putting your best foot forward. So if you have any questions, my cell is in my signature, and so happy to answer any of those questions. Call me, text me, email me, whatever's best for you. And so, but most of the time, what we find with those letters of recommendations are your boss, a past boss, a volunteer gig that you hold, maybe you're on a board somewhere, a mentor, a past leadership Louisville graduate. Any of those are really good ideas for your letters of recommendation. And then as far as a headshot goes, you'll just send that directly to my email. If you have any questions around that, please let me know. And then we'll have optional interviews. And so those will take place the second week of November. And so those are available for anybody who hasn't been through a Leadership Louisville program. You want to know a little bit more about the center, but you also want us to know about you. And I'll send out more information about those interviews as we kind of wrap up the application process. The deadline for all of these materials is November 6th. And so please know that is your deadline is 11:59 p.m. on that evening. But I will be emailing you, as you send in different pieces of your applications, you will be hearing from me. And so the letters of recommendations, I'll let you know if you're missing one or if we're still missing your headshot. So don't stress out over that. I'll definitely be in communication with each of you as those pieces kind of start to trickle in. And then the other thing I wanted to touch on is the tuition cost of the program. So the cost is $4,500, but we certainly understand that not everybody can afford that price point, and so we do have tuition assistance. In this year that so much has happened, we do anticipate that the request will be large, and so I do want to mention that unfortunately we typically cannot fund anything over half of what that tuition assistance or of what that tuition cost is. But please let us know how much you need, and we have a tuition assistance committee that goes over those requests. That does not impact your ability to participate in the program whatsoever. Those are two different committees. So just to kind of give you a heads up, but that is part of the application. So if you do need assistance, please just fill that part out in the application itself. And if you do not, then you can go ahead and skip over that part of the application. Again, if you have any questions, my cell is going to be in the email that I send out, and you already have my email, but I'll be sending you an email again. So don't hesitate to ask any question at all. I've gotten a lot of people who are like, this is kind of a weird question. There are no weird questions. There are no questions that are too small. So hit me up at any point. And Joe, did you by chance see, are there any questions in the chat around application?
Thanks, Amy, for that. I don't see anything around applications. I do see some questions coming through in the chat, though. The first one I see is Allison is asking how much of the program will be virtual versus in person. And I think at this point, because things change, as we know, so rapidly with the pandemic, and it's really difficult to say what the situation is going to be like in January when this program begins. So I don't think we can give you a concrete answer. This program used to be totally in person. We have done a lot since January with all of our programs going virtual and having hybrid experiences. The current class, we have been in person several times. We've had smaller groups. We take all precautions when we do that. It has been mainly virtual for most of this year for the current Bingham Fellows. However, I will tell you, we now have a wealth of experience doing things virtually at the Leadership Louisville Center, so I can guarantee your experience, no matter what happens with the pandemic next year, will be just as robust as every other Bingham Fellows that has come before it. And we will always keep safety as a top priority as we go through the experience. But as we move forward, we'll know more, and as things develop, we'll be able to make a better plan and give you more detailed information about that. I did see another question about the retreat. This is from Terrence. Could you explain a little bit more about the retreat? I think for that one, I may throw to Cynthia, or actually Joe and Tara may also want to jump in about their own experience at their retreats.
You know, the retreat is, it accomplishes a couple things for us. One, we'll do some things that are about increasing the level of trust amongst Bingham Fellows, because one of the things that we've learned, if you want to accelerate the pace of change, then you need to accelerate the speed of trust. So we'll do some things at the retreat that that make investments in our ability to create bridging capital. We'll do some things that kind of narrow our focus. So we throw a whole bunch of stuff out there, and then the retreat is designed to help you figure out, sort through all of that, and get down to actionable items. Now, from a format perspective, you know, it will depend, like this kind of piggybacks on what Joe was saying about virtual versus live. We will definitely do some of it live and connected. Usually we do an overnight retreat somewhere, some, you know, lovely facility that allows you to take a walk in the woods. I don't know for sure if we'll do that or not. Our objective is to be very responsive to wherever we are in pandemic procedures, and figure out, you know, kind of, again, just to echo what Joe said, figure out what is the best call for what's happening, you know, a week or 2 weeks in front of us. And we'll adjust accordingly. So I can't say for sure, are we going to do an overnight retreat, or are we just going to figure out how to build all those components to make them work for what the circumstances of the day are. But I can tell you that we've had quite a bit of experience at this point, so I feel good about our ability to interpret that correctly.
And then either Joe or Tara, I don't know if you wanted just to touch on the your retreat experience in terms of how that played into the whole Bingham Fellows year.
The retreat was probably one of my favorite parts. It was so nice to get to spend a concentrated amount of time. Now, for our group, everything was in person. We didn't do any virtual. So we'd already met quite a few times by the time the retreat got around. But the retreat was a great time to really spend a day and a half and really concentrate on taking all the stuff that we'd learned to date and then start to tease out some different threads of potential projects and the whole process that you go through with the ideas and throwing them up on the wall, and the facilitated process was really great. It also didn't hurt that one of the people in our group was from Brown-Forman in terms of the night that we hung out together. So, but it was, the retreat was really positive, really intense. You come out of the day two pretty tired, but really fulfilled, because all of a sudden, all this learning you've done takes shape into some potential projects.
Thank
Joe,
you.
I think Tara had to jump off. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
just saw that. So thank you, Joe.
I did see one question earlier that was about the steering committee. So, and the question from Allison was, can we tell you who's on the steering committee? No, we can't tell you who's on the steering committee yet because we're still pulling it together. But I can tell you from a kind of from a design perspective who will be on the steering committee. We lean towards people who have been Bingham Fellows graduates because they have an understanding of how Bingham Fellows works. And then at that point, we're trying to get advisors who represent lots of different kinds of knowledge, because we rely on them pretty heavily to help us craft. You know, as you can imagine with Bingham Fellows, we choose a different topic each year, and we're not the experts on all of these different topics. So we need to round up a room full of experts to help us. And what we're looking for in our experts this year are a blend. We'll have, we're talking to a couple of our alumni who have pretty deep experience in tackling racism, either through kind of a grassroots activism lens or through a corporate lens. So we've got a couple of people that we're talking to that will help us offer advice and guidance from that lens. And then we'll also balance it with a few people who are corporate leaders and can tell us, you know, can balance the, well, here's a grassroots perspective, but here's a corporate perspective. And we'll get a couple of people who work for some of the nonprofits in the community that are, you know, on the ground, boots on the ground, doing some work. You know, a balance of folks who are, you know, who bring the Black perspective and can help us understand, you know, how do we be good allies? How do we show up in that capacity? So that's kind of, that's the general who will be on the steering committee.
Thank you, Cynthia, for answering that. I do see a couple more questions about how often will we meet and when is the opening day again? So it is roughly once a month throughout the year, through January. We do have 2 dates though in February, and of course the retreat in May is a 2-day retreat, but I'm sure that Amy will include all of those dates in the email tomorrow, so you'll have, rather than me read through them all, you'll have them in your inbox. The first date though, because that was a specific question, January 28th is the orientation. Let's see, anything else come through?
Joe, there was a question about average age and experience of the participants.
That's a great question. And I think we've touched on it. It is quite varied. It's different than our other programs because it's based on interest in the topic. So there are going to be absolute experts in this topic in the room, and there are going to be people who do it for a living, and there are going to be people who it's their passion and it's something they work on outside of work, but they've been involved in it from a volunteer capacity, or it's their passion. So there's a wide range of titles and experiences, but everyone is invested in this topic in a different way.
I think part of it is it's a bell curve with Bingham Fellows. So we'll want some next generation, young thought leaders in the class, but then we also want some wisdom. We want people who know this topic, but we also want people who bring fresh eyes. So if you don't know this topic, but you want this could be your opportunity to jump in and increase your level of understanding. But it's a bell curve.
Thank you, Cynthia. I don't think we have any new questions in the chat, but of course, if you do have any questions following this, please do reach out to Amy if it's about recruitment and about the process. I'm happy to answer any questions about the topic itself, and any program questions. Feel free to reach out to either of us if something occurs to you after you leave today. I also want to thank you again for taking an hour of your time and spending it with us and the Leadership Louisville Center. And I know that Tara has left, but we thank her in her absence for being here this morning. And also Joe, thank you for joining us and speaking about your experience in Bingham Fellows. So again, please reach out if you have questions. We do hope to see you in the Bingham Fellows class this year, and have a wonderful rest of your day.